On the heels of the Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank failures, we're getting news that First Republic Bank might be in huge trouble. Welcome back, everyone. So we got some news today about First Republic Bank and a major drop in deposits. I just wanted us, before we take a look at what's happening with First Republic Bank, let's take a look at some comments made a month ago by our favorite Treasury Secretary, which, to be perfectly honest, has always ensured us that the system is stable and resilient. Sound and resilient. Let's dive into this. The multi-regulator U.S. Financial Stability Oversight Council agreed on Friday that the U.S. banking system remains sound and resilient. Despite stress on some institutions, the U.S. Treasury said in its latest statement to calm jittery markets and bank depositors. The council discussed current conditions in the banking sector and noted that while some institutions have come under stress, the U.S. banking system remains sound and resilient. Guys, this is a lesson. This is a lesson to all of us in truth telling, okay? You don't actually have to tell the truth. You simply just have to keep repeating the message enough for everyone to believe you. It doesn't need to be true. It doesn't need to be real. It just needs the power of repetition. The more you know. The video conference meeting came as markets continued to seesaw amid concerns that the 2-week-old banking crisis sparked by the failures of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank could worsen, spreading more runs on smaller banks. So when they use words like could worsen, they already know it's going to worsen. That's my opinion. I believe that they completely understand that because don't forget, right? The architects of the financial system, we sit there and think, oh, they don't understand what the money printing's doing. No, they understand what the money printing is doing, I think, for the most part. I believe that people like Janet Yellen really do understand that they're just creating money out of thin air and that they're playing with interest rates. So this is not, this is not some sophisticated financial tool like these institutions and these people would have us believe. This is a bunch of nonsense. It's absolute garbage. And we're essentially watching these people LARP with our value and our lives. Anyways, in separate remarks, there was no indication that financial stress was worsening this week, allowing them to raise interest rates by a 0.25 percentage point. Yellen again sought to calm fears of further bank deposit runs on Thursday. Keep in mind, this was in March, telling U.S. lawmakers that she was prepared to repeat actions taken in the Silicon Valley and Signature Bank failures to safeguard uninsured bank deposits if failures threatened more deposit runs. Those actions to invoke systemic risk exceptions were taken by Yellen, President Joe Biden, the FDIC, and the Fed, which supervised Silicon Valley and Signature. So, why am I reading this, right? March 24th, banking system is sound and resilient. So, as you can imagine, when we woke up this morning, First Republic stock drops nearly 50% after a plunge in deposits. Well, there's that things could get worse for the smaller banks. Let's dive into this. That's right, guys. April 25th, 2023. We're still seeing more fallout. And I just, again, it's not about being right. It's just about understanding that we are never told what is accurate and we are never told the truth. But several weeks ago, when we did clips about Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank, kept on repeating that we're going to see more of this fallout. Now, is it a nothing burger? Is it not? Let's dive into this article. And I mean, look, the title is hyperbolic. So let's take a look. First Republic stock plunged by nearly 50% at the close of trading on Tuesday, hitting a new record low after the embattled lender reported late Monday that its total deposits fell 41% in the first quarter to $104.5 billion. Fell to $104.5 billion. Keep that in perspective. Even after a consortium of banks stepped in with $30 billion to prevent the regional lender from failing. Without that cash infusion, deposits would have fallen by over 50%. So you're telling me that $30 billion simply helped by 9%? Like that's all it did? It mitigated 9% of the risk? It's kind of like a drop in the bucket, it seems. Analysts were expecting deposits to land at around $136.7 billion. Okay, so look, but before we go any further, I know that a lot of there's many Bitcoiners that Bitcoin is the quote unquote only asset that some of them have actually ever held. There's a lot of people who have never bought stocks, have never dealt with equities. Okay. And I just want to explain something. Every quarter, analysts give their projections. They give quarterly projections. They give yearly projections. They do all of this stuff. Okay. And they give recommendations. And what happens is that when companies don't meet these arbitrary expectations from these analysts, which, let's be honest, have no relation to these companies in any way. So when the companies do not meet these arbitrary random numbers, it creates the environment where you're going to have, in some cases, right, increased volatility either to the upside or the downside. But the reality is that expectations from these analysts really don't mean shit. It's sadly, I think it has to do a lot with the fact that most people just have zero confidence in what they're doing, and they essentially look to these people, which are conferred the title of analyst for signal. And sadly, these people are not signal. Anyways, I'm not saying this to discredit the analyst or to necessarily say that, their numbers are entirely made up, because their numbers are obviously based on projections from previous numbers. But I think that people need to realize that you got to take this stuff with a grain of salt, and it doesn't really freaking matter. Anyways, let's continue on. First Republic Bank also expects to cut its workforce by 20 to 25%, which naturally, right? They're in San Francisco. We're seeing, we saw Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank go down. I'm pretty sure that both of those banks had something to do with First Republic as well. I'm sure that these three banks are doing business together. So naturally, you take out these two other players, you're going to see this third player get hit. This is not rocket science. This is not like, oh my gosh, we weren't expecting this. We knew that we were going to see something else. The bank said it saw a sharp drop in deposit activity after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank last month. But that activity began to stabilize at the end of March and has since remained steady. So we're starting to see the makings of the nothing burger. We experienced unprecedented deposit outflows, said CEO Michael Roffler on the call. But deposit activity has evened out since the end of March, he added. Total deposits were $102.7 billion as of April 21st, 2023, down only 1.7% from March 31st, 2023. That small drop, he added, likely reflected regular seasonal client tax payments. That's right, guys. While we're all sitting here in the echo chamber thinking every single bank is just going to disappear overnight, it was tax season. There's a whole bunch of people that simply had to pay the government, So again, we're starting to build out the nothing burger. Wrapping it up, First Republic also said in its earnings release on Monday that it was taking actions to strengthen its business and restructure its balance sheet. All right, guys, I know that we're seeing a lot of really hyperbolic news coming from some pretty big influencer accounts, talking about essentially how like the banking system is so fragile and it's going to collapse and this and that. So look, I just want to give a different perspective. Like, I'm not saying the banking system isn't going to collapse. We do have world history of banking collapses. And although history doesn't repeat itself, as we know, it often rhymes. Regardless of what we're seeing in the news, the US dollar is still probably the dollar in the highest demand around the world. Everybody, or the majority of countries, their dollars are significantly weaker, which, believe it or not, makes it so that the US can and essentially affords the luxury of being able to print a lot more. Now, granted, this isn't good for any of us because, as we all know, this is monetary debasement and all of us are being punished. But if you're holding Bitcoin and you've learned to either run your own node, run the Bitcoin Core software, or get yourself a hardware wallet and be self-sovereign, then really, like the rest of us, you're just watching the show. And that's really how I feel. When I see this type of news, it doesn't really bother me. I'm just watching the show. So this particular bank failure is obviously very closely related to Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank. I do think I do think it is a nothing burger in the end. I don't think it's actually that bad. Obviously, it's not a good thing, right? Like, you don't want to see a whole bunch of these institutions go away. You know, the other thing is that don't forget, right? When we had the issue with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, what happened? The Treasury, right? The Treasury, the FDIC, the president, what did they do? They went and made it so that the bigger institutions are now protected and essentially incentivizing people to move their money to these bigger institutions that can supposedly handle the strain. So look, guys, again, the whole reason I explain this is because I just want people to really look at this and try to be objective about it, right? I know when we're in the echo chamber, it seems like everything is falling apart. All the banks are going to fail. All that's going to be left is Bitcoin. You know, people talk about this thing like, Bitcoin hyper Bitcoinization, right? So this isn't one of these things where you just flick a switch and all of a sudden it's hyper Bitcoinization. We are every day going through the process of hyper Bitcoinization. You just don't realize it because we are in the throes of it. We are part of the wave, so to speak. Anyways, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you all tomorrow.